Welcome to today's video. This was recorded at the 2300 Tyvola Road. I like those bees right there. Look at all those bumblebees. I see that and I think to myself, the Nicki Minaj song, Bees in the Trap. It was always a fun one. Younger days, I'd turn it on in my car and try to feel as cool as you can feel when you're listening to Nicki Minaj. So here we are at the Tyvola Road access. We're exploring mountain bike trails today. There is an expansive set of mountain bike trails. I only had time to film 2. This one, I believe, is called Nintendo. It is more of a beginner trail. I don't know much about mountain bike trails. I'm more going to be commenting on the nature and things that cross my mind as we look at the imagery. Here we see ourselves just completely lost in the forest. And I'm going to silence myself for a second so you can hear all of the birds and the bees for a few seconds. Isn't that wonderful? Now what jumps out at me here is just seeing the ivy on the ground. Typically, ivy like this is regarded as a lawn pest. And here in Charlotte, it is a constant war that we wage against the ground ivy. It will take down trees, it will cover walls, but here in sort of an unmanaged ecosystem, it really does a nice job at keeping things green and probably does a decent job at fighting erosion as well. This particular trail now, we're going through sort of more suburban terrain than rural terrain. I think at a bus of school. This was nice because it was flat. I was traversing this terrain on foot, but I can imagine that on a mountain bike you could ride here fairly safely and just sort of do a assistance check, make sure you're good to take on the more challenging terrain, some of which we encounter later in the video. This berm here is kind of neat. It's a neat little causeway. A lot of clay everywhere, and sometimes it makes these interesting shapes, and that's an example of one where you just sort of have a drop off on the side. It makes for an interesting, almost a sense of danger while you're walking, because you know that even though you're safe, if you were to fall, you'd fall a few feet. We just passed a tree, 2 trees growing out of the same trunk. That always makes me happy.
Yeah.
And here we see, oh, you just heard the voice of my co-creator. She is the joy of my life. Here we're doing a little descent into some dark shadows. The greens look really good in the dark. One of the reasons why I decided to go in the forest rather than to go right onto a more immediately used path by foot traffic was simply because the sun was too high in the sky. If you look at the forest floor where the sun is breaking through the canopy, it's very bright. And that dappled sun is really fantastic for the canopy. And where it breaks through, you can see that stuff is starting to grow up at a fast rate. But it is, it's really hard on the cameras. It causes everything to wash out and kind of look gray. So I made the decision just to go in the forest and pick up what I could pick up. And we got what looks to me like a landscape painting, like a Midsummer Night's Dream. There was is he disgraced? I don't know if he's disgraced or not. There was a New York filmmaker who made a Midsummer's Night comedy of some sort. And I always feel whenever I reference a Midsummer's Night Dream that I'm biting his routine, so to speak. But, you know, the guy made a lot of good films, so I don't know. It's a tough one. In either case, here we are in more of a savanna-like ecosystem. So we can see that there are stands of trees growing, the floor is clear. You could, if you wanted to, you could just walk through the forest floor and be fine. I'm sticking to the mountain bike trails because I wanted to sort of have a start and an end. And I wanted to see where they went. Now these trails are interesting because they just sort of wind back and forth. If you look on the map how far they go, they don't really go far at all. But they go back and forth a lot. There's a lot of switching back. And this particular trail, again, nice and flat, so there aren't too many berms or banked turns, but those come later. I love seeing all the bugs and the butterflies. It was nice and cool on the forest floor in all the shadows. It's April here, so it's already warm. I think it was in the I'm trying to be metric. I think it was about 30 degrees, which is mid 80s. And there we can see, if you look dead in the middle of the screen, you can see a vine-covered tree covered in kudzu, I believe. I don't know if that's ivy or kudzu, but I don't know if it's good forestry management or not to trim those back. But there it was. That's an example of what an invasive species can do to an ecosystem. It's well past us now. But here we are again on another platform, another little terrace. Looking at this, I wonder if this area was somehow, in earlier days, either farmed or otherwise terraced, because there are vestiges of earlier use, either in the form of pavement or blocks, and I wouldn't be surprised to learn that there was an old farm here at one point or another back in the 19th century. The canopy comes down pretty low. I'm not hitting my head or my camera on the leaves, but I'm coming close to them. And honestly, I think that's a pretty cool feeling to be that close to the leaves. When you feel the leaves so close, and especially now, this time of year, where they're in full flourish and are actively releasing oxygen into the air, I just feel a sense of brightness, being able to access all of that so close to my face. I think it's ultra concentrated. And even if it's like 5 or 10 feet above you, it mixes and diffuses, and it's not as concentrated. So if you're doing an active sport beyond just walking, but riding a mountain bike, it's probably fantastic to be so close to these plants that are really actively photosynthesizing. Now here we see a lot of younger sort of saplings. I'm wondering if a tree had come down and now we're seeing the race for tree dominance. One of these trees that we're seeing on one of those saplings will eventually be the only tree that survives. And in a lot of ways, that's a metaphor for life and careers. Now we all sort of start out as saplings with lots of opportunity, and eventually someone wins out, and a lot of us just kind of fall back onto the forest floor. My recording partner wants to say something as well, so we are going to give it a try. What is something that you'd like to say?
Also, it's really green in that forest.
And what does the green make you feel when you see the green?
Like I'm looking down at a clover patch.
Ooh, a clover patch. That's so wonderful.
Or grass.
Or grass. Well, one of the neat things about trees and clover and grass is that they all share a process by which they make their own food. It's called photosynthesis. And what photosynthesis does is mixes carbon dioxide from the air and water from the ground and sunlight from the sun using a special chemical called chlorophyll, more like borophyll, and then uses it to, I think it moves some electrons or something around, but basically it mixes the carbon dioxide and the water together into sugar, which is called a carbohydrate. So the old word for water, and I think it was Greek, was hydros, and carbon was always carbon. So carbohydrate just means carbon and water, carbohydrates, sugars. All sugars are carbohydrates, all oil is carbohydrates, all of that stuff. In fact, the oil, the gasoline that we put in our cars comes from trees that fell millions and millions and millions of years ago, before even the dinosaurs, or maybe contemporarily with the dinosaurs, and then got buried under the ground, and it rotted into what's called crude oil, which we then refine and burn in the cylinder to capture its energy. But yeah, I mean, that is the same thing. All of these plants share that in common, in that they use the color green, or pigment that's green colored, to make their own food. So they don't have to get up and look for it. They can just make it, as long as they have access to sunlight and water. So here we're leaving the trail. That was a short trail. It was only a little 10-minute walk. Again, systems check. And now we're back sort of in the main parking lot. I decided here to explore one of the access roads. So no vehicles, but I saw some runners. I saw some people riding bikes as well. And this is where we start to see the first real little bit of serious mountain biking. I'm not sure I saw the actual showstopper trail I just kind of saw the first one. It was marked with a blue square, which means intermediate. I think what that means is, as you're learning to operate a mountain bike, this could be an appropriate trail for you to use if you're a little more than just a beginner. That's typically what blue square means to me in my mind. But again, I'm approaching as a walker. And we can see the terrain feels similar to starting off flat. And we are getting that sunlight. It's causing a little bit of glare, but again, as we turn directions, that will go away. And again, it's a painting. We're in an impressionist painting. I love this. I'm going to watch this on my couch tonight. Not on my phone, but on my couch. I'm going to cast it or use my rig. I'm still doing the old workstation, media station setup back from before Web 2.0 was a thing, or when it had just become a thing and they hadn't made the same set of utilities that they did in the 2010s. I love it. It gives me a lot of flexibility. That's my personal preference. It's not for everybody, but it serves me well when I'm just trying to take in sort of artier content like this here that I'm making, which is just, again, a landscape painting, almost an impressionist painting. I mean, it's no Monet, it's no Manet, it's not a French impressionist painting by any means, but you know what, it's just kind of natural. It's what, you know, the creator gave us, whatever that happens to be. And I love to watch it. I mean, I feel like this is the type of content that transcends time. Someone could watch this as a human 500 years from now and think to themselves, wow, that is true beauty. Going out into those woods and seeing the lush green springtime landscape with all of the intricacies of color and light and motion. And how lucky are we to live in a day and age where someone can just go out and record a trail made by someone who cared about the earth enough to go and build a trail so that everyone else could share that experience. I mean, that's the real person we should be thanking, is the group that made this trail. And there's a little sign at the end. I think it's called the Tarheel Trailblazers or something like that. I'll see if they have a YouTube handle, and I'll point that out to them. But they made all of these trails. It's an amazing network of trails that I'd like to further explore in various different weather scenarios. But this day was just really unique. It was a warm, clear sky, and again, early spring. I'll come back here in the fall time when there's color on the trees, and I think that will be a real treat as well. Although there are so many other places that are a short drive, or even really within the city, where you can experience the true beauty of the fall time on the East Coast. But that's for a later date. Right now we're just enjoying spring. Now that's a magnolia tree that we're just passing. One of these things is not like the other. One of the neat things about being this, oh, look at that kind of old growth there on the left. One of the neat things about being this far south is that in addition to the northeastern hardwoods, we don't get much maple, but we do get a lot of oak, we get pecan, walnut, hickory, but we also get some of the Louisiana trees. We get the nolias, the nolia. If you listen to any of that Cash Money records back in the day, you know what the nolia is, bro. But or woady, you know what the nolia is, woady. But that's neither here nor there. But we do get magnolias. They're beautiful trees. I had no idea what a magnolia was until I was like much later in life. But I had heard it quoted in hip hop way back when. But you know, reverting back to the trail. So we're seeing that the trail here is really getting those switchbacks. There's banking. On the banks, there's stumps and roots to avoid. So a little bit of technical skill will be required here. I kind of picked up the pace here because it was fun. The trail was so fun as a walker that I even started to run on it a little bit. Not so much. I have an injury. I was hit by a car, and thankfully nothing happened. It sat low. But the upshot is I'm not running right now. I have to recover for the next 3 or 4 weeks, hopefully, and then I'll be back running again. But I think it hurt my fibula. So if you do see me running, that's just the pure ecstasy and delight of being in nature and seeing this wonderfully designed and thought out, well-placed trail. You know, when I think of design for courses that people use, kind of urban city dwellers use, what comes to mind immediately is a golf course, right? And obviously this isn't a golf course. This is a mountain bike course. But when I think golf course, I think of the famed landscape architect Donald Ross, who designed many fantastic golf courses, many public up north, and down here, private and very well regarded. And it makes me wonder, who is the premier landscape designer for mountain bike trails? And can we go around identifying, oh, this is a so-and-so's mountain bike course? So it's going to have the hallmarks of how they go about doing their design. So if on any chance you're seeing this video and you're watching it and you know that answer, feel free to put in a comment that so-and-so is a great mountain bike course designer. So when I was talking about reclaimed terrain, we see here there's some vestiges of human use. We're coming up on a meadow. It looks like it's still mowed, and there's some leftover stuff from the 20th century that we just went by. And it's nice to see that there's rewilding happening around it in the 21st century as we think a little more deliberately about how we use our land and how we curate our lifestyles. Back on this trail, if you look, you can see now there's a pretty significant pitch. So we started high up on a hill, and we're descending into the Sugar Creek Valley. There's a greenway down there. It's called Sugar Creek. It's named after the Suga Native Americans that lived here. They were Catawba tribe, but the sub-tribe was Suga, and the natives, that's what they call. They lived along it. I don't know what their lifestyle was like. From what I understand, it was a very rich lifestyle in many ways, but it's one that's been lost to time. And this is my way of connecting with that lifestyle, is going out into these woods. It's not an old growth forest yet. It's very much a new growth forest. But I am tromping along on the ground, and I'm not looking for hickory nuts or deer, or not growing maize with squash and with beans. Although I do eat a fair bit of grits now, and I do eat squash and beans as well. But it's, I want to feel connected to the land. I think everyone has a yearning to feel connected to the land. Oh wow, look at that fallen tree. And this is one way for me to do that. But anyway, the folks that were here before us, are in descendants, if not direct ancestors, were called the Suga, and the greenway is named after them. This was an interesting part of the trail. So this starts to set up high on a bluff. Again, we're descending into that valley. I didn't stop to show off the canyon, but it's a full-on draw. I think that's what they call it. It's not quite a canyon or a ravine, it's a draw, but it's a significant drop. And I can imagine at speed on a mountain bike, it would be very disorienting to see that if one false move and it's I want to say lights out, but it's a drop. It's a nice optical illusion. I don't know if it's safe or not, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was noteworthy. In fact, I remembered it for the voiceover. And here we are again. There's that big drop. So it's bigger than a house. It's got to be at least 30 or 40, 10, 12 meters up. And you can see, because we're on this sort of hillside that faces southeast, we're getting a lot of light. The trees are getting a little bit bigger, and there's just a lot of growth competing to reach that canopy. Something's going to grow. It's going to grow big. Maybe one day it'll be able to grow. I don't know what sort of forestry management techniques they're using on this wood lot here, but whatever they're doing, it doesn't look like it's much, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I really don't know. I'm not a forester, but I do drive one, which I love. It's my favorite. It's not my favorite, but I do love it. And here we are, back on the trail, just trying to thread the needle between, on the right-hand side, the highly human-altered environment, and where we are in the middle, the unaltered environment, and then again to the left, again the highly human-altered environment. So on this greenway, I've seen wildlife in the past. I've seen deer. I've seen I want to say egrets or cranes. Herons. I don't quite know. There's a lot. I've seen fish, and I've seen beavers and stuff. So I mean, it's a resource. It goes all the way down to South Carolina and up to pretty much the outskirts of uptown Charlotte, even. It's a great resource. This is just one little spur off of it. Again, used primarily by mountain bikers. But looking at the ground, you can see that unlike where we were at the top, there's less ivy, sort of preventing new life from growing up, and a lot of just young growth forest. Which makes me wonder, does the presence of invasive ivy cause our forests to become old growth faster by discouraging the growth of saplings and seedlings? And that's a question I'm just unqualified to answer. But it's a thought that crosses my mind. And as I have the ability to sort of sit here and analyze this experience of walking around on the mountain bike trails off of 2300 Tybola Road along the Sugar Creek Greenway. One thing I didn't see very much of was flowering. Now, we've been up to the mountains, we've been to the Blue Ridge, and we know that in really thick forest, there are understory plants that do flower. And I suspect that if someone was so inclined and had permission, they could introduce, in addition to this sort of natural understory, some human-altered understory, just to provide something different to look at. Because it is a real joy in the summertime to get out underneath the forest canopy and feel that cool shade, rather than being out in the meadow and feeling that warm heat that can be, that southern sun gets hot no matter where you are. But there's nothing, it would be nice to have something interesting to look at as well. And that's one of those things. I'm sure somebody at State or at UNCA or even UNCC is qualified to give some insight into that. But as soon as you see any sunlight, just like we saw, boom, there's a bunch of life just growing, trying to make use of that energy. Nothing's wasted. I think that's the true beauty of the ecosystem in nature, is that nothing's wasted. Sunlight that's hitting the ground, if there are resources to grow plants, they grow up. Stuff that falls off those plants, the fungi start immediately decomposing it. The ants start eating the fungi. The birds eat the ants. The bobcats and the foxes and the bunnies, they eat it all, and nothing's wasted. It's truly miraculous that this existence, without any sort of intervention, is occurring. And getting out in nature, I think, really hammers home that point. So it's a wonderful resource to be able to get out here and see that. Now here we are in a denser sort of new growth forest. Looks like the canopy is a little thicker and there's less stuff coming up. But as soon as you get more into the old growth, and we see, we see that the old growth comes up, the bushes are a little lower, and the trail becomes a little bit easier to identify. So I'm just going to enjoy the walk for a few seconds, get my thoughts together. What I'm really enjoying is looking at the size of all of these trees. It looks like it's not a monoculture in that there are different species growing up. They're all about the same age. So my thinking is that there must have been either some sort of fire or mowing that had stopped right around the same time, and now all these trees are sort of coming up so that they're the same width, and they kind of look like poles. Here we are in a meadow. I don't know what that meadow is about. I wonder if there's an access road or something adjacent to it. But again, once we get past that, we're in the pole-sized trees, sort of spindly. We can see the bottom underbrush is kind of dried out. It's probably having trouble getting light. And this is the type of terrain that is savanna terrain. It's the type of terrain where someone could just walk and not have to stay on the trail and still be able to see what's happening. It's not too overgrown, not too thick, and that's nice. I think it's a good reflection of just being able to take care of an area without having to overly maintain it. But then there are all these grassy patches too, and I'm wondering where these grassy patches come from. Was there an old house here? Was this an old farmstead? It probably would have been a very productive place in the 19th century, just by virtue of its location. This intersection is the intersection of two brooks, and there were always resources that would enable any sort of agricultural endeavor. And it was located close enough to what was then a transportation hub, the city of Charlotte. It would have been, I think it's like 4 miles, it's like, 8,000 meters, 4 miles or so, to where the train tracks to either the New York market or the Atlanta market would have been. So you would have been able to get your whatever you were growing to to larger markets, either for export or even just to the mills. There were mills in uptown Charlotte at the time too. They could have grown their wares here and then manufactured them and then shipped them. That was a different time. That's a bygone era. That, I think, speaks to the timelessness of these nature walks, and that it allows you to have a touch point with the present. Because, I mean, if you listen closely, you can hear planes, you can hear cars, you can hear the 20th century. It's there. But you can also think about what people were doing in a time when life was both simpler but also harder. So it's just that the human experience. You get out into the woods. I think that's why people are driven to go hiking, and it's subtle. It's an undertone. It's something that goes without processing when you're out in the woods. All you're thinking is, wow, this feels good. I'm walking step by step. I'm taking in what's around me. Plants, animals, colors, shapes, textures. But what's missing is the consideration for how that is just the human experience. It probably, in my opinion, goes beyond the human experience. It's probably something that is interspecies, in that there's a satisfaction that comes from getting out and ultimately foraging. I'm not necessarily foraging for food, I'm foraging for views, to share, to consume for myself. Doesn't matter. But I'm just seeking something out, and brings me enormous joy and pleasure. And my hope is that by putting this onto the World Wide Web, that other folks can experience this and sort of transcend place and time, so that they can say to themselves, wow, that's cool, that was a lot of trees and shadows. And really nothing more, but I didn't regret spending a half hour of my time relaxing and just looking at it and contemplating the blue sky, the bright sun, the green leaves, and that's it. And now we're leaving the woods. We're coming back to reality, back to life, back to reality. And here we see the TarheelTrailblazers.com. They do the maintenance. They provide the trail reports. Next time I'll probably try to peruse that website so I have a better idea of what it is that I'm about to record. And then an additional thing they do, mountain biking is an important part of the Charlotte culture, and it looks like there's an organization that teaches you how to do mountain biking. So they have summer camps. This is their QR code. If you're interested in accessing their portal, that's how you do so. Just scan your TV with your camera, and it'll open up the QR code. And thank you.